Hi, I'm Rita Wilkins, also known as the Downsizing Designer. So one thing I learned and I didn't expect was that a closet could actually change my life, and how letting go of that past helped me fall in love with not just my home again, but also myself. And that was all because I learned what my clutter story was. Do you know what your clutter story is? Hopefully at the end of this video, you will. So we all have a clutter story somewhere. And mine began on a wintry day a number of years ago as I stood in front of my many closets in my very large home before I downsized. I remember standing there with a cup of coffee in hand, and this was the day that I would finally tackle that one closet that I had avoided very carefully for a long, long time. When I opened the door, I actually froze. There they were, the beautiful business suits, the many still had tags on them, the silk blouses, the tailored jackets. It was a wardrobe that had once represented power, success, and identity. And suddenly, to my surprise, I started to cry. Those clothes weren't just beautiful fabrics. They were me, or at least the old me, the woman that I used to be. The designer, the business owner, the speaker who once raced from one event to the next, rarely stopping to ask what any of it truly meant to me. But as I stood there staring at those suits, I realized something very powerful and profound. I hadn't worn them in years. My life had changed. I had changed. Yet I was still holding on, not to the clothes themselves, but to the version of myself that they represented. That's when I thought about a local women's shelter that I cared dearly about and love and support. And it's a place where women can go in the middle of the night with just clothes on their back because of abuse. They also have loss and they have many hardships. It's all about them starting over. I could suddenly see those women wearing those beautiful suits, walking into a job interview, feeling confident, dignified, and also hopeful. So that image changed everything for me. In that moment, something inside shifted. I went from having all this excess to having plenty. So that day, I packed up every single suit, every pair of high heels, all the accessories that went along with them that belonged to that past chapter of my life. And I delivered them to the shelter. And when those women saw those, they were thrilled. And I could just picture them using those suits to go to their job interviews. So driving home, I really felt much lighter than I had in years. And for the first time, I understood something really special. It wasn't the stuff that was holding me back. It was the story I had attached to it and had told myself over and over again. That moment of clarity began the beginning of my real downsizing journey. And that decluttering method, decluttering by heart, became the method that I would use to then declutter the rest of my entire house. We all have stories, and there's stories behind the stuff. So I've learned that clutter is rarely about the mess. It's usually about the meaning. Our homes are living museums of our stories. Every object holds a whisper of who we were, and sometimes who we wish we were. And for baby boomers like me, those stories span many decades. The wedding china that we still never use, but we can't give it away, are the boxes of children artwork that sits in our basement long after the kids are already grown, or the books that we promised ourselves we would read again someday, or those clothes that we hoped we would fit into again, or those items that we keep just in case. We tell ourselves these things are practical and sentimental, but underneath there's something much deeper. They represent our memories, our milestones, and our identities. And sometimes they represent our fears, fear of letting go, fear of forgetting, fear of losing a piece of ourselves. But here's what I've discovered, and it changed my life. You don't lose yourself when you let go of the past. You actually find yourself, because waiting underneath all of that clutter is who you are right now. So your home should tell the story of who you are now, not who you used to be. So I didn't realize it at the time, but on that winter morning, I stumbled onto what I now see as unusual decluttering method. It wasn't about labeling or organizing or minimizing. It was about connecting. So that simple act of compassion, imagining those suits empowering women and having them have a fresh start, became my greatest decluttering tool ever. It helped me let go room by room, item by item, and it worked because it wasn't rooted in guilt or obligation. It was rooted in my heart and my compassion and desire to help those women get a fresh start. So here are some of the most powerful and unusual methods that have helped me and thousands of others finally free themselves, not just our homes, but their lives. The first one is called the compassion exchange. So when I released those suits, I discovered that generosity is actually one of the greatest and fastest paths to freedom. Instead of focusing on what you're losing, I focused on what someone else would gain. Every time I let something go, I imagined who might benefit from that. A young woman starting her career, a family furnishing their first house, home or apartment, or a child discovering how much fun it is to learn from a new book. It turned decluttering into something almost joyful and purposeful and deeply fulfilling. So when you give with compassion, you receive something far greater, and that's peace. The second unusual decluttering method was the legacy lens. And this is actually one of my favorite ways to decluttering with meaning. So when I hold an item, I ask, would I be proud to leave this behind as part of my legacy? If the answer is no, then it might well be time for it to say goodbye to it. So this question shifts the focus on what do I need today to what story do I want to leave behind. So a woman I worked with once told me she had dozens of beautiful crystal glasses and vases in her basement. They had been wedding gifts, anniversary gifts, and that kind of thing. And she said they were just too nice to use. But when she looked through her legacy lens, she realized it wasn't important to leave her daughter memories. It was far more important to leave them memories rather than all of that pretty glassware. She kept a couple of them that she truly loved, but donated the rest. And she said afterward, it was the first time in years that she felt in touch with what's most important to her. The third different kind of unusual decluttering method is the honor it and release it ritual. So decluttering doesn't have to be cold and transactional. Before letting go of something that's meaningful to you, take a moment to honor it, say out loud what it meant to you, take a photo, and then write down the memory and what it represents. Then release it with gratitude. So this is a small ritual, but it allows you to keep the memory without keeping the object. I remember a woman who had kept her wedding dress for 40 years, even though she was divorced. She didn't want to wear it again, of course, but she couldn't part with it either. So together, as we talked about it, and all the things that the dress represented, it represented her youth, her dreams that were shattered, her family. She looked at a beautiful photo of it. She took a beautiful photo of it. She wrote a letter to her younger self, and then she donated it to a local theater group, which I thought was a wonderful place to donate something like that. So she later said, I didn't lose the memory, I just let go of the pain that was attached to it. The fourth is the declutter by heart method. This is one of the most emotional and liberating ways to let go. Instead of thinking with your head, do I use it? Does it fit? Listen to your heart. Notice how your body feels when you hold that item. Do you feel does it make you feel light or heavy, joyful or sad, energized or drained? Keep what feels light and uplifting, and let go of what carries weight and also resistance. It's really that simple, and it's pretty profound. So then there's the future self-test. This one's powerful for anyone who's going through a transition like a divorce or retirement or a big loss. Ask yourself, would the woman I'm becoming need or love this? So when I downsized, I realized that many of my belongings belong to an older chapter of my life, not the woman I was becoming. So once you begin decluttering for your future self, you stop grieving what you're losing and start celebrating what's next. And then last is the Freedom Box Challenge. So if you're struggling with sentimental items, just try this. Choose one box, fill it with the things that you think you can't possibly part with, store it out of sight for about 30 days, and then if you don't think about it or miss it, obviously it's time to say goodbye to those things. So freedom isn't always found in getting rid of things. Sometimes it's in realizing that you don't need them to feel whole again. So what's your clutter story? And what happens when you change that story? So decluttering isn't just about removing stuff. It's about releasing stories that no longer serve us. I've met so many women with powerful stories. There was Lynn, she kept her husband's things for 7 years after his passing because it didn't feel right to her to give them away. When she finally began letting go, slowly, respectfully, and with love, she said that it was like he was giving her permission to move on and to live again. And then there was Carla, who kept boxes of her children's things, even though they'd left for college. She said she was afraid to let go because she might be closing the door on her own motherhood. But when she reframed that story as taking space for who she was becoming, she found freedom again in painting, traveling, and some other hobbies. And then finally there was Susan, who was retired after 40 years of teaching, but she still held on to her lesson plans, the classroom decorations, and hundreds of thank you notes from over the years. She finally let go after asking herself, would the woman I am today need to remember the woman I was? She smiled and she said no, but she did keep a note or two that helped remind her of how much she was loved. So each one of these women found peace, not because they got rid of things, but because they rewrote their clutter stories. So if you're ready to change your clutter story, start by doing something small and start with meaning. So pick one space in your home that represents an old story. For me, it was that closet. So for you, maybe it's a closet, a drawer, a storage bin, or somewhere in the attic. But make sure that it's one that you've been avoiding, because that's probably the signal right there. So ask yourself, what story does this space tell about me? What has this chapter taught me? And what story do I want to tell next? Then, with compassion, begin to edit that story. So you're going to keep only what supports who you are now and who you're becoming. And as you go, notice how you feel. Each item you release creates a little more space, not just in your home, but in your heart. This is it's not about deprivation, it's about liberation. So it's about creating a home that feels peaceful, welcoming, and aligned with your current life, not the one that you've already lived. So when I finished decluttering my home years ago, I didn't just fall in love with my space again, I fell in love with myself again. Because in that quiet, uncluttered space, I rediscovered my purpose, my joy, and my freedom. So when you change your clutter story, you change your life. So if there's one thing that I've learned after decades of designing spaces and helping others downsize, it's this. Decluttering isn't really about stuff. It's about stories. It's about the courage to say, this part of my story is complete. It's about the grace to let go with gratitude. And it's also about the faith to believe that what's ahead is going to be even more beautiful than what you've left behind. So today I invite you to ask yourself, what's your clutter story? And more importantly, are you ready to rewrite a new one? So because when you change your clutter story, you actually change your life. So I hope this helps. Now I do have a special announcement, and it's on another note, but if you've been part of my followers for a long, long time, many of you have been asking if there was some way that we could go deeper into your decluttering journey, deeper into the content. So in response to your requests, I've been creating something special for those loyal followers, and I will announce this in my next video. So we'll be looking forward to that, and I can't wait to tell you what it is. Take care.